Welcome back to The Pursuit of Progress. So guys, I heard something recently from one of both Ben and my favorite, very, very successful guys on the internet. He's also a really big podcaster. His name's Ed Mylett. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about this. So he shared this idea how ships, they don't sink because of the water around them. They sink because of the water that gets inside them. Now, obviously, he wasn't really talking about ships. He was talking about us. He was talking about human beings, because all of us are surrounded by things that can get to us, whether it be criticism, rejection, failure, stress, comparison, maybe other people's opinions of ourselves. Somebody out there is doubting us, and a deal falling apart, a business idea that doesn't work. All that stuff is just water around the ship. But most of the time, that stuff alone isn't what sinks us. It's when we start letting it get inside. When somebody else's criticism becomes our own self-talk. When one failure turns into, well, you know what, maybe I'm just not good enough. When somebody else doubts us, and eventually we start doubting ourselves. So today, on a brand new episode, Ben and I want to dig into this idea, especially when it comes to self-talk, self-belief, and self-confidence. Ben, welcome back. And let's just jump right into it for the audience today. Help us kind of get into this.
The water is always going to be there, and the water for all of us could be something different. The first thing we have to accept is that the goal isn't to somehow create a life where there's no water around your ship. That's not going to be possible. If you're trying to build anything meaningful, the water is always going to be there. Starting a business, somebody's going to doubt you. You put yourself online and somebody will criticize you. Try something new and you might fail. Becoming successful, and suddenly there are even more people with opinions about what you're doing. And I think sometimes falling into this trap of believing once I get to a certain level, life will get easier and then I'll finally feel confident. I know that I've felt that way myself at times over the years. As a teenager, as a young adult, once I do this thing, or once I get to this level, or once I achieve this, then I will have a higher opinion of myself, or I will feel more confident. But it doesn't always work that way. Every new level comes with new problems, more responsibility, more expectations, more opportunities to fail. Maybe even more people watching when you do. So maybe confidence isn't believing that nothing bad is going to happen. Maybe confidence is believing whatever happens, I trust myself to handle it. And I think the water, as you were kind of indicating a minute ago, the water can be something different for all of us. It could be an addiction. It could be lust. It could be in the indulgence of life. It could be poor decision making. It could be avoidance of avoiding something. And it's when you allow that water, whatever it is in your life, into your life and take root, that's where the real problems happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. When other people's voices become your voice, you got a problem, and
yeah,
I think this metaphor really gets interesting because, how does the water actually get into the ship? Well, a lot of times it happens slowly. It doesn't just rush in. Somebody tells you that you're not good at something. At first you disagree, but how many times has this happened to all of us where, maybe you struggle a few times after that, and then eventually you start, instead of saying that, they don't think I'm good enough, you start saying I'm not good enough. Their voice then becomes your voice. And I think almost everybody has something like this that's happened to them. Maybe somebody told you that you weren't smart enough, you weren't athletic enough, you weren't outgoing enough, you weren't good with money, you're not a leader. I don't know. There's so many different examples I could use here, but I think, sometimes these comments, they could have even happened, a decade or two ago, but we're still letting them influence these decisions we make today. So just think, think about how crazy that is. Somebody that says something to you when you're 15 and now you're 40 and you're still making decisions based off of that. At some point, you just have to ask yourself, is this actually true? Or have I just repeated it so many times that it feels true? And I just will share a quick personal example of just not really somebody else telling me this, but I think just my internal self-talk that's always telling myself that I'm an introvert. And I think so many people use that as an excuse to limit themselves on just, putting themselves out there publicly, especially with You and I both really, leverage being online a lot and, just having a digital personal brand online and how challenging that's been for both of us. But a lot of that challenge came from just this internal self talk about, like for myself, I'm an introvert. I can't do that. I can't publicly speak. Where literally for the last
Yeah.
couple decades, I've told myself that. And now it becomes almost my identity when it's not at all. So,
It's interesting because what are you believing? Because
mm,
one person could say something really negative, speak something negative into your life, and somebody else could speak something very positive. But what are you believing? I think young people, especially myself as a kid, it's like I would latch on and believe the criticism, but then almost dismiss the compliment or the constructive feedback. When I feel like that, I'll go back to the Bible at times and say, what does God say about me? What is written in the Bible about who I am? What is and understanding what my created value is, why I'm here. As you were just saying with online, if you follow me online, you'll notice that I've gotten a lot more active on social media. I went from posting maybe a couple times a week to posting 10, 15, 20 times a day. And there's an element there that's very uncomfortable because you are exposing yourself to everyone. And you have those internal dialogues. What are people that have been following me for the last 10 years? Like, what do they think now? What's their opinion? They've noticed my patterns change. I've a lot of the feedback overall has been very, very positive, but I have taken some criticism from people in my group who have either called me or commented or messaged me like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Like, who do you think I've gotten those messages, and am I gonna focus on that, or am I gonna focus on the 100 positive comments that I've gotten?
very true. Yeah.
And here's the other thing, your brain is always going to be listening. And I think that leads perfectly into self-talk. I'm one of those people when I talk to myself, I don't know if you do this, but when I talk to myself, I will talk to myself out loud. I will actually have conversations with myself. And so a lot of times I'm either in the car or I'm in the shower or I'm just kind of like by myself. And I don't even like notice it, but the people around me do. They're like, "You're talking to yourself again." And believe it or not, people that have out loud conversations with themselves, it's a sign of being a genius. It's one of like
Hmm.
the genius characteristics. And so whenever
Hmm.
they say that, I always just kind of joke back, well, it's a genius characteristic.
Yeah.
But most of us would never talk to another person the way we sometimes talk to ourselves. Dude, I used to be so critical of myself. I mean, I would never talk to a friend the way that I talk to myself, especially like when I was a kid growing up in sports and in my 20s. Dude, I was brutal on myself. I mean, I would just tear myself down and what the F is the matter with you? Like, can't you do any better? Like, you screwed that conversation up. Why don't you say this? Man, and I have learned now to really give myself grace and to really just be my best friend. And, just think of that. Like, be your best friend when you're having these conversations. You probably wouldn't respond with something like, "Yeah, because you're an idiot, you're terrible at everything. You should probably stop trying." Those are the type of conversations that I used to have with myself. Hopefully, you have better friends than that, and we'll say versions of those things to ourselves all day long, like, "I'll always screw this up. I'm terrible with money. I'm awkward. I can't do that. I'm not disciplined. I'll never be successful." And here's what I think that's dangerous when we start talking like this. When you start telling yourself the same story 1,000 times every day, you start to believe the story and it starts to become your identity. I had the same challenge, going into a job that's you have to be very outgoing with both of our jobs and what we do. And I'd put that label on myself that I'm introverted.
Hmm.
I'm not good at socializing. I'm not good at connecting. And I put this label on myself ever since I was a little kid, not realizing that networking, socializing, getting in front of people, that's an actual skill that you can develop. I will never be more than likely Mr. Outgoing, but now I consider myself a social introvert. And when you acknowledge and remove some of those labels that you put on yourself, you can actually enjoy some of these things. Public speaking used to terrify me. And now it's something I really actually enjoy. It gets my blood flowing. I get to get on stage. I get to present. I get to help educate others. It's something that I really, really enjoy. So instead of saying negative things to yourself like I'm bad with money or I'm lazy or I'm not an entrepreneur, start changing those statements. Start talking about yourself, who you want to become, or who you have a vision for yourself of who you're going to be in the next 5, 10, 20 years. And how does that person look? How does that person talk? Start talking like that right now.
Yeah, your example of public speaking and how I think that's something that so many of us deal with. And I still get nervous. I still have a hard time with that. My hands get clammy, just anxious, all that kind of stuff. But it all comes down to just that confidence, and you build that confidence through evidence, through
Yeah.
actually taking action. It's probably the biggest thing on my end that I want everybody to take away from this episode is how I don't think confidence comes from standing in front of the mirror every morning, saying, I'm amazing, I'm unstoppable, I'm incredible.
Unstoppable.
There's nothing wrong with positive, I guess they're called affirmations, but I think
Yeah.
real confidence, it comes from something a lot more practical than that. And it's just simple. It's keeping promises to yourself. So we talked about this on the last episode too, with just things like, going to the gym. You don't see your biceps get bigger after one day at the gym, but there's a lot deeper meaning and purpose behind building up this routine and that confidence, because by keeping promises to yourself, you're actually living up to your future, ideal version of yourself. If you tell yourself you're going to wake up early tomorrow and you do it, well, you just kind of put a little win in the little box. You cast a little tiny vote for yourself. If you say you're going
Yeah.
to work out and you work out, that's another vote. If you say you're going to, make the phone calls you need to make tomorrow and you actually make them, that's another vote. So if you
Hmm.
say you're going to, stop drinking, if you're going to save money, if you're going to start a business, whatever it is, just actually do it, finish whatever it is, whatever that project might be, make that uncomfortable phone call, whatever it is, actually do it. And by doing that, you're going to start collecting evidence and you're going to start proving something to yourself. And that's this little thing that's kind of undetectable from the outside, but it's very, very impactful and meaningful, because when you say that you're going to do something, you're telling
Hmm.
yourself that you actually trust yourself. And to me, that's, I think, where self-confidence really starts. It's the confidence isn't something that you magically find. It's something that you actually earn from yourself.
Yeah, and what you're describing, I'm glad that you brought that up, is something that I call the confidence bank account. And I think of confidence almost like being an investment or a savings or a bank account. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you make a deposit. Every time you do something difficult, even though you're scared, you make a deposit. Every time you recover from a failure, also a deposit. Every time you stand back up after getting knocked down, another deposit. All of these different things, the perseverance, the fortitude, the resilience, just being a powerful, strong person, following through with what you're going to say. Every time you do those things, you're making deposits. You're making deposits into your confidence bank account. But here's the deal. The opposite happens too. Every time you repeatedly tell yourself you're going to do something and then you don't, you're making a confidence withdrawal. And eventually you might start wondering, why don't I believe in myself? Well, maybe part of the answer is that you've slowly trained yourself not to trust your own word. And that's not meant to beat anybody up, but I actually think it's really good news, because if confidence can be damaged through our actions, it can also be rebuilt through our actions. You don't need some giant life transformation to start. Just make one small promise to yourself and then keep it. Make another and then keep that one. Eventually, the deposits start adding up and your confidence radically changes.
I really like that. The confidence bank account. Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
Confidence bank account.
let's just kind of make this practical for everybody as we close out this episode. So, little 7-day challenge for you guys until the
Okay.
next episode comes out. So, I think this is something that both of us and really everybody listening can try for these next 7 days. So, catch yourself whenever you make a negative identity statement. So, not
Okay.
legitimate criticism. We're talking about things like when you say, I'm terrible at this, or I'm lazy, I'm stupid, I don't know, always mess things up. I can never do that. Whatever it is, just when you catch yourself saying those types of things, don't replace it with some ridiculous statement that you don't believe. Just make it a lot more accurate. So instead of, I'm terrible at this, say, I'm still learning how to do this. Or instead of, I'm not disciplined, I haven't been disciplined lately, but I can change that today. Instead of something like, I always fail, say, that didn't work, but what can I learn from it? It's a
Yeah.
tiny, tiny difference in just the language, but it can create a huge difference, again, in that identity. And that's what's so important.
And you're not talking about, avoiding accountability or not taking responsibility for your actions.
No, definitely not. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, and that's what makes all the difference. Where there's a huge difference between critical and derogatory towards yourself, calling yourself a name, putting yourself down, and taking responsibility in a constructive manner. And I'm a big, I've been working on this over the years, and I've just taught myself I am never going to say something derogatory about me, not even in a joking way, not even in a like, I'm not gonna like dismiss myself like that. You will never hear me even like joking say that. I try and teach my kids that. I'll catch them at times when they say stuff like, no, that's not how we talk about ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I think just to kind of close this one out, you guys, if you remember anything from this video, this episode, remember the ship. Again, this is all about how ships don't sink from the water out
Yeah.
around, is from the inside. So there will always be water around you. There will always be people who doubt you. There will always be setbacks. There will always be failures. There will always be things that you guys
Yeah.
can't control. But those things don't automatically get to become part of you.
It doesn't matter what you do. You could have incredible success. You could have incredible failures. People are going to criticize. They're going to have their own opinion. They're going to doubt you. They're going to dismiss you. They're going to question you, whatever you do, whatever your results are. So just go be your best. Ships don't sink because the water around them. They sink because the water gets inside. So protect what's inside. Protect your belief in yourself and start giving yourself evidence that every day you can trust yourself.
Yep. Yeah, because self-confidence isn't believing that, I can never fail. It's really the self-confidence is just knowing that, like, even if I fail, I'll be okay. And I'll learn, I'll adjust, I'll keep going.
And that's what this entire podcast is about. Progress isn't about becoming perfect. It's about continuing to move forward. Don't try and be perfect. If you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to be perfect, that means that you're trying to not make mistakes. So the goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to do your best, to move forward, to pursue.
Absolutely. Well, you guys, hope you got some value out of this one. Thanks for listening to another episode. As always, don't forget, reach out if you have any questions, if you guys ever want to connect with us. Just don't worry about being perfect when it comes down to this kind of stuff, you guys. Just focus on getting a little bit better today, a little bit better than you were yesterday. And with that, we'll catch you guys next time.
We'll see you guys on the other side. Have a great week. God bless.